All right, we're diving deep today, and this one was requested the Ultimate Lymphocytic Colitis Diet Guide. So if you're listening and you're like, okay, just diagnosed with lymphocytic colitis, what do I do? Well, we're serving up a whole feast of knowledge to help you manage this thing, specifically with diet.
And keep in mind, this guide we're diving into comes straight from Care Clinic, and they're a healthcare provider, so it's definitely in their best interest to get this information out there, help patients, take control of their health through diet.
For sure. So when we say lymphocytic colitis, what are we even talking about?
So it's an autoimmune disease. Basically, it means your immune system, that's your body's defense system, right? It kind of gets confused and starts attacking the lining of your colon.
Yeah.
And that leads to chronic inflammation. It can be a lot more serious than just, a little upset stomach.
Yeah. Definitely not something to just ignore. Now, we should say you need a colonoscopy and biopsy for diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting into that here. But what we are going to do is unpack how important diet is for managing lymphocytic colitis.
Yeah, because think about it. Everything you eat has a direct impact on your gut. And your gut, believe it or not, has trillions of bacteria. It's like a whole world down there. So when we talk about good foods and bad foods for your gut, we're really talking about what's going to nourish all those bacteria.
Right. Okay, so give me an example. What's like a good food that's going to keep those gut bacteria happy?
Fiber. Think of fiber as a prebiotic. That just means it's fuel for the good bacteria in your gut. Things like beans, lentils, leafy greens, those are your friends. They're packed with fiber and they help keep things, moving and grooving down there. Now, on the other hand, you've got your processed foods, the ones that are loaded with sugar and those unhealthy fats, and those can actually disrupt the balance in your gut. And when that happens, you get inflammation, which with lymphocytic colitis is the last thing you want.
So it's like we're talking about giving your gut an army of good bacteria to fight off the inflammation.
Exactly. And this guide we're looking at, it's really great because it lays out the essential nutrients, the things you need to really nourish your body and manage those symptoms.
Let's break those down a little bit. We talked about fiber. That seems like a big one. But I'm guessing it's not as simple as just like eat more fiber, right?
You got it. There are actually two types of fiber, and the guide highlights both of them. You've got soluble fiber. Think of it like a sponge. It softens your stool, makes everything move smoothly. Then you've got insoluble fiber. That one's more about keeping things regular, preventing any backups.
Okay, so we're regulating traffic flow in the gut metropolis with fiber. What else do we need on our team of essential nutrients?
Probiotics. They're like reinforcements for your good gut bacteria. Help restore that balance, keep things harmonious down there. You can get them in foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, all those fermented foods, or you can do supplements.
Got it, probiotics. Okay, what about vitamins and minerals? Are those like the construction workers building up our defenses?
I like that analogy. Yeah, vitamins A, D, and C, those are crucial for gut health and for your immune system overall. And then you've got zinc and selenium. People don't talk about those as much, but they're super important for keeping your gut strong and healthy.
Like a whole team effort in there.
It really is. And speaking of teams, let's not forget, the best source of vitamin D is actually sunlight. But a lot of us aren't getting enough of that, so we have to make sure we're getting it from our diet too. Things like fatty fish, eggs, fortified foods, those can help fill in the gaps.
Great point. Okay, so we're arming ourselves with all these essential nutrients, but what does that actually look like on a plate? What can we eat? Give me the good stuff.
Fruits and vegetables, those are your foundation. They're packed with nutrients and fiber. And for people with lymphocytic colitis, the guide really emphasizes cooked options because they're easier on your digestion.
That makes sense. What about protein? We're stuck with like plain tofu and nothing else?
Not at all. Lean protein is super important, but you've got options. Fish, skinless poultry, beans, lentils, tofu, eggs. It's about giving your body what it needs without overtaxing your gut.
Lean protein. Check. Now, let's talk about fat for a second, because I know that fat doesn't automatically equal bad.
You're right. We need healthy fats in our diet. Things like those omega-3 fatty acids we talked about. Those are the ones that help reduce inflammation and keep your gut happy. You can find them in fatty fish, avocados, nuts, seeds, lots of delicious options.
This is making me hungry. So we're talking delicious and nutritious. But I'm guessing that with all this talk about what we should be eating, there are also some foods that we should be avoiding, or at least limiting, right?
You're definitely right. It's not about deprivation, but it is about being mindful of what might trigger your symptoms. And this is where listening to your body is key, because what bothers one person might not bother another. It's all about figuring out what works best for you.
I love that. It's like we're creating a personalized roadmap for a happy gut. But before we get too excited about all the good stuff, I think we've got to address the elephant in the room. Those foods that might send us running for the bathroom, or at least leave us feeling not our best.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's rip off the Band-Aid. What are the foods that we might want to be a little wary of?
So the guide breaks these down in a helpful way. First, we've got what I call the usual suspects: spicy foods, caffeine, alcohol, artificial sweeteners. Those are all known to potentially irritate your gut.
Yeah, it's like they're waving a red flag.
Exactly. Then you've got your unhealthy fats. We're talking saturated and trans fats, the ones you find in processed foods, fried foods, things like that. Those can really contribute to inflammation.
And we can't forget about added sugars. It's like they're throwing a party for the bad bacteria in your gut.
Exactly. Now, this no list is a good starting point, but remember, everyone is different. What bothers one person might not bother another. You really have to pay attention to your own body.
That's where that personalized approach comes in, right? But how do you figure out what your trigger foods are? It seems like it could be a lot of trial and error.
That's where a food diary can be super helpful. The guide talks about this, and it's a great tool. It's like you become a detective for your own gut.
I love that. So we're putting on our detective hats. What kind of clues are we looking for?
You're tracking what you eat, obviously, but then also how you feel afterward, any digestive issues, changes in bowel habits, how's your energy level. You start to put the pieces together.
It's like solving a puzzle.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
might seem like a pain at first, but the more you know about how your body reacts to different foods, the easier it'll be to make choices that make you feel your best.
Absolutely. Okay, so we got our essential nutrients, the foods to enjoy, the foods to maybe be a little cautious of. How do we put it all together? How do you take this information and actually make a plan?
That's one of the things I really like about this guide. It doesn't just tell you what to eat, it talks about creating a balanced meal plan. And it emphasizes those fruits and veggies, lean proteins, healthy fats, all the good stuff.
So it's not just about like brown rice and steamed chicken every day.
Not at all. It's about making healthy choices that you enjoy, that fit into your life. And one thing that can be really helpful for people with lymphocytic colitis is to eat smaller, more frequent meals that can be easier on your
It
digestion.
makes sense. What about how you cook? Does that matter?
It can. Steaming, baking, roasting, those are all good options because they tend to be gentler on your digestive system than, say, frying.
Okay, so we're getting creative in the kitchen. This is making me hungry. But I imagine that even with all this information, it can still feel kind of overwhelming, right?
For sure. It's a lot to process, and that's why it's so important to loop in your healthcare providers.
You're not in this alone.
Exactly. The guide talks about working with a registered dietitian, and that can be a game changer. They can help you create a meal plan that really meets your needs and fits your lifestyle.
That's so helpful. And of course, you want to stay in close contact with your doctor, make sure you're on the right track.
Absolutely. It's a team effort. And speaking of teams, I think it's important to acknowledge the mental and emotional side of this too.
That's so important. We've been so focused on the physical stuff, but living with a chronic condition like this, it can take a toll, right?
For sure. It can be stressful. It can be isolating. And the thing is, stress can actually make your symptoms worse.
So it's not just about what you eat. It's about how you manage stress, how you take care of yourself mentally and emotionally.
Absolutely. This guide focuses mainly on diet, which is great, but it's important to remember that true well-being is about the whole package, mind and body.
So maybe alongside those food diaries, we should also be scheduling in some self-care, some stress-reducing activities, things like that.
I love that. Meditation, yoga, spending time in nature, whatever works for you, taking care of your mental health is so important.
It's all connected.
It really is. And this guide, it gives us a great starting point, but it's important to remember that management is the key word here.
There's no quick fix,
Yeah.
right? It's about finding what works for you, working with your healthcare team, and being patient with yourself.
Exactly. It's about tuning into your body, making changes gradually, and not getting discouraged if you have setbacks.
And remembering that knowledge is power. The more you understand about this condition, the more empowered you are to manage it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You know, as we're talking about all this, something occurs to me. The guide talks a lot about what to eat, but it doesn't really get into the how of eating.
Ooh, interesting. Tell me more.
Do you think that mindful eating practices, being present when you eat, chewing your food thoroughly, really tasting what you're eating, could that play a role in managing symptoms?
It's like we're so used to rushing through meals But maybe slowing down, actually paying attention to what we're eating, could that make a difference?
That's what I'm wondering. And it's something we could all probably benefit from, right? Not just people with lymphocytic colitis.
Absolutely. So to our listener who requested this deep dive, we hope this has given you some helpful information, some things to think about, maybe some new tools to try.
Yeah. And remember, it's about working with your healthcare team, figuring out what works best for you, and not being afraid to experiment a little.
Because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah,
The more you know about your body, the more you can take control of your health.
couldn't agree more.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Big thanks to our expert for breaking down all the details.
Always a pleasure.
And to our listeners. Until next time, happy eating.